Good morning, Nolan, Bitcoiner. Another episode of The Breakup, a show where we look at our relationship with money and contrast the relationship with the US dollar and Bitcoin. It's a show that really tries to compare the two worldviews and suggests it's not really about the math. This is an accounting issue, it's a psychological issue. And therefore, the construct of a breakup is more appropriate to deal with what's going on than just, oh, look at the math. It's better with Bitcoin, 21 million. It's not really there. Although that's foundational to the psychology. We're not saying that it's the math of the 21 million that are essential. It's the psychology that comes with the certainty of the 21 million that helps Bitcoin perpetuate forward. And really, that's what it's about. It's about the psychology of the users and how much they're willing to help perpetuate the system, especially important when we're dealing with a decentralized system like Bitcoin, right? The need for that is great. Just 1 second here. Got a vacuum running and I can't hear anything. Oh, pardon me for the thing. So it's the psychological switch, right? That's really the important piece. Oh, just a second. Just a second. So this psychological switch is the point of this show, really. And it's a little bit how I came to it, even Bitcoin. So this is something I forget the Twitter username. I took the picture, but I've stolen this little infographic from someone on Twitter today. I'll put a link or on my Twitter. If you go to my Twitter, I think I retweeted it, so you'll see who did it. So pardon me for not giving the credit, but it's just a great little graph, right? And what it shows is capitalism, socialism, and that it's a perpetual cycle, and that we've got this exit plan, exit strategy, and that's Bitcoin. And this piece here reminded me something of that Greg Gutfeld, the Fox News host. I guess his evening show is now the most popular evening show on television. He just launched it this year, and it wiped out all these losers, Stephen Colbert, and all. No one watches them. Just terrible. So he's already crushed them all. I think he's even got it to where he's the combined audience of all of them, but don't quote me on that. But he came up with this idea that the prison of two ideas, and that's that the political system that we know offers these two options on almost any question, and then it becomes a choice between one of the two. Now, I've always thought two-party system has advantages, right? The advantage is no one should spend that much time deciphering every little detail in politics. You create two parties, they become an aggregate of opinions, and it's more or less in the direction that you want to go. So it should be okay. The problem is not so much two-party here as it is the two ideas, right? So the two parties work if the ideas that they're promoting aren't so predictable based on a million other decisions they've made, right? So it becomes almost irrational and tribal at a certain point because the ideas can't float freely, right, on every question. They have to get aggregated into the two piles. And what I found was because they become aggregated in the two piles, on almost any question, it's just a fight, right? Even if you change your mind, it's not a certain thing and you could sort of be turned around and change later. And I learned this because I spent a lot of time working in politics before Bitcoin. Before Bitcoin, I was a lawyer. Well, not I never passed a bar or wrote a bar or anything, but I went to law school. And then my first gig out of law school was with the Senate Banking Committee in Canada. I'd done a bit of work with the political party that had taken power in Canada while a law student, but when I graduated, I had the ability to join the administration at a very high level and saw a lot of stuff. And at the time, I thought we can still explain things and we can argue and debate, capitalism versus socialism, and if we're right, if we get enough people to see we're right, we're gonna um, have a following, and our ideas are going to perpetuate. What I quickly realized after a few years in that game is it wasn't the case. People don't change their mind based on facts, and none of that's true. Even if the argument is better, this prison of two choices forces us into these camps for a million reasons, and we pretty much dig our feet in. And that's the same for me and as for anyone. right? So I'm not saying it's these stupid people that can't see past it. It's inherent. It's the operating system of most people, right? You don't want to piss off your friends. You don't want to piss off your social cohort. You put a bunch of work in for a degree that was going to get you a thing, a job, or whatever, some form of credential. So you don't really want to burn any of this to the ground, obviously, right? So choices end up being made based on more or less what's good for you and what you think is good going forward, right? So it's not really about who's right in the argument, and most people will twist whatever they're seeing in order to fit their view of the world, which is why we get caught in this cycle, right? Very few people sort of defect between these two sides. The arguments just go around and around and around. And most of the institutions that we have help perpetuate this cycle, right? So the Fed, within this two choices, how much we're printing, how much taxes are, all kinds of, credit availability. These things are debated by either political party, but it doesn't change the idea that the Fed is there and there is a top-down control, right? So the prison of the two choices leads you to the same area, right? Wall Street, quite similar, right? There's, certainly people saying we should tax Wall Street more, but no one is saying get rid of the institutions, right? Mass media was very similar, right? The audiences in mass media congregate similarly to the political parties they follow, right? So when I mentioned Greg Gutfeld's audience is about as big as all of the other evening hosts combined, that's really a reflection of Fox itself being the audience of Fox being about equal to the audience combined of MSNBC and CNN and a few others, I believe, which are sort of more left wing, news outlets, right? So the same groups congregate under, and the only reason why Fox News is as bigger, as far as I can tell, the only reason why Fox News is as big as the combination of the left-wing media outlets is simply because it's, not monopolistic. There's a lot on YouTube, Right Side News Network, and a few of these other ones. But none of them really put a dent in Fox's domination. And so Fox's domination is not so much that it's the biggest and strongest news network. It's the only one on the right? So it doesn't splinter the audience the same way MSNBC and CNN do, which are sort of more, graduated forms of left-wing or socialist news. There's a slant, right? And I'm not under any illusion that any news source doesn't have a slant, right? That those days are long gone. Left, right, there's a slant, and I accept that. Public school, there is private school, of course, in these two, but it's very similar curriculum, very similar situation, geared towards sending you to university, geared towards, many of the same qualities. You've got the 9 to 5 unit, right? That's another institution that helps perpetuate, this system. There isn't really anyone within either of these things saying, well, 9 to 5 is not going to work. And in history, before the internet, neither of these had any solutions to get rid of 9 to 5. Of course, now, I'm sure you'll see some policies in both that promote an end to 9 to 5. But remote work is really crushing the 9 to 5 mindset. And then, of course, you've got W-2 filers, so employees, versus 1099 contract workers. Very similar to the 9 to 5 and remote work, except the 1099s are quite heavily used in the creator economy and the gig economy. But the answer in the end is the institutions, right? The institutions that help keep us in this sort of fake prison of two ideas, right, are the institutions we sort of built the modern world around, right? The Federal Reserve in banking, Wall Street, this is kind of related, media, school, and employment, right? So all of these institutions, help with taxation. This is where we spend the taxes. The curriculum comes in either case from the state. And when I say capitalism, I mean the capitalism we've known until now, right? That's the one with, like I'm not gonna talk about some ideal capitalism like I'm not gonna talk about some ideal communism, right? Both of them have a lot of influences from institutions, so they are both forms of the idealized version. So I'm not gonna mention that this is not the idealized version of capitalism, and this is not the idealized version of socialism. This is the one we have. It's the realpolitik version. So this includes all of the you know, crony capitalism that goes on in America and anywhere, right? So these two options really, in the end, keep us in this fake prison of two ideas. And you know, the ideas around the Fed perpetuate the Fed. There's tension within it when you look at this, right? The same as mass media, the same as schools. We see the tension of public and private schools, the same tension we would see here. But the exit strategies, right? And these are the ones that Bitcoiners are following, right? Bitcoin equals no Fed, so no more institution, right? So it's no longer the choice between capitalism and socialism, right? Those policies are quite different. Um, Getting rid of the Fed is just a totally different scenario that might not even allow for anyone to choose between capitalism and socialism, right? It sort of removes some of those choices um, because the institutions are different. um, Mass media moving over to social media. Um, and these contrasts here are something that Naval Ravikant came up with, just about leaving institutions, right? So I've taken his message about leaving institutions and mixed it with this prison of two ideas concept, and just to show that, you know, when you get rid of this prison of two ideas and the institutions that perpetuate choice between two ideas and offer this third rail like Bitcoin does for the Fed, you actually start getting somewhere beyond the limitation of the two choices. And things like homeschooling become more obvious. And that's why so many Bitcoiners are leaving for homeschool, because it's very similar in a sense, because they're abandoning the fake choice between private and public school, right? Or the fake prison. It's not a fake choice, it's a real choice. But the prison of, you know, these are the only two options. Charter could be mixed in there too, and I'm a big proponent of charter for sure. Didn't include it in here just because it's sort of along the same trend. And you know, the 9 to 5 piece, the W-2 piece, I don't think I'm even employable anymore, right? As a long-time Bitcoiner, forget about the money for a second, right? Just erase the money for one moment, because I've spent so much time in this world of Bitcoin and working in this industry. You start to understand a lot more about the costs, the true costs of being an employee, having a 9 to 5, and being a W-2 filer as an employee, right? The whole point of employee versus an independent contractor is something called subordination. That's the legal concept, right? So you can work for someone and they say, I want a project like this. But the minute they start saying your hours, how you have to do the job, how you have to perform your function, when you have to start, when you have to finish, that becomes subordination, and you are therefore an employee, right? If you get to choose all of those factors, you're not an employee, and you're a independent contractor and a 1099 follower, a filer, we say in America. W-2 is an IRS filing form for employees. A 1099 is a IRS filing form for independent contractors. And the 1099 forms, of course, have a lot more discretion, let's call it, for the users, and certainly, don't force you to perpetuate a lot of these fake prisons. So the institutional exit plan of Bitcoin here, right, between capitalism and socialism, actually applies, because it's with the Federal Reserve, right, actually helps perpetuate all of these changes after, right? So the main idea here is that as we go forward, you no longer have to choose between public and private school, right? Although you can, no one is saying you don't have to. There's now a major third option perpetuated from a group of people who are growing in number every single day and have an entire worldview and are offering a structure, socializing, and other things with children. You know, I have children, and as a Bitcoin parent, I naturally now congregate towards other Bitcoin parents, just because our worldview is quite aligned, and the homeschooling feature is almost implicit in some cases, right? Sometimes they don't even have to ask. Oh yeah, let's let our kids play together. Obviously, they're not going to a public school tomorrow. It's a Tuesday or whatever, but we regularly do that. So Bitcoin does offer this exit strategy from this prison of two ideas. And when you break free of the prison of two ideas, it starts to create a trickle down effect where all of these other exit strategies for other institutions that are all perpetuating this prison of two ideas, those exit strategies all become more concrete, more apparent, and more obvious to folks. That's all I got for today, guys. A slow news day, given we're just ending Thanksgiving. Ghislaine Maxwell's trial is starting today, so I'm going to go watch a bit of that. And maybe I'll come up with something for the show around Ghislaine tomorrow. But until then, ciao.